Hello and welcome to this video and to April's book review. As usual, filming this when I get the chance to, so we're filming this on the 23rd of April, which obviously means we have a little bit of time until the end of the month, but this comes out before the end of the month anyway, so that's why. So there will be some overlap into May as well. In April I have 7 books to talk to you about. And I also, as of filming, taking part in the Magical Hopathon Part 2, so when we get to those books the mini-years will come on. And I'll explain a bit more about it when we get to those books, because this time it was only a 2-week readathon. So without any more blabbing on from me, let's move into the books. So I started the month with The Love Square by Laura Jane Williams. Laura Jane Williams is the author of Our Stop, which I read at some point, and if I can find the book review I'll link that up here for you. But this one follows Penny Bridge, who has not had the best luck in life or in love, and then all of a sudden there are 3 men that fall for her and that want to date her, and she has to essentially choose between them. I saw a video not that long ago where they had a little bit of a rant about the terminology of a love triangle, and they didn't talk about a love square, but I also will say a love square, in that it's not a square or a triangle, and I fully agree, because that would imply that person at point A, B and C all have affection for each other, so B and C also love each other or lust each other or whatever, which is not the case. And they were saying that a love triangle is actually a love arrow, and I would argue a love square is a love teepee. Don't know why I felt the need to share that with you, but I fully agree with their comments, and I think we need to rebrand the terminology. But the love teepee probably wouldn't have been quite as good a title as the love square. So I did enjoy this book a lot. It did take me a little bit of time to warm up to Penny as a character. Originally I found her a little irritating, but as the book went on and I learnt more about her life and things like that, I warmed up to her. I would say I preferred Our Stop to this one, but I do really enjoy Laura Jane Williams' writing. The other thing that frustrated me slightly is that it takes a long time to get to know all 3 prospective partners, which I found a little bit confusing, considering as the book's premise is about 3 people that want to date her, and for a lot of it we had one or two. And without giving any spoilers, I would have preferred a different ending to the one that we got, which I felt was a bit cliched and a bit safe. I would have preferred something a bit more daring, I guess, from Laura Jane Williams. That being said, this book does have a lot of LGBTQIA representation. There's talk about being non-binary, about non-monogamy, about surrogacy and all of that kind of stuff, which are big topics to cover in this. I wouldn't say that you go into a lot of detail, so I wouldn't be picking this book up if you want to learn about any of those topics, but it's nice to see that they're now coming into fiction a lot more, and will give people a chance to go and explore it further if it's something that they're interested in. So a good way to start the month. It was a very easy read. Laura Jane Williams, as I say, writes very well. If you're going to pick up one or the other, I would recommend Our Stop over this one though. So that's The Love Square by Laura Jane Williams. I then went to my Kindle pick of the month. So as you know, I am trying to cover off 3 things each month, to read a book from my Kindle, a non-fiction and a reread. So the Kindle book this month was People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. This follows a mum blogger. She's big on Instagram, and you see her life compared to what she's putting online. It's a thriller, so obviously someone knows the truth about the differences. This book started so well and I was so into it, and I was like, oh my god, this is great, this is going to be like a 5-star read, but then it really tailed off and I got a bit bored towards the end. It's quite a short book, it's less than 300 pages, but I felt that they started it really well, but the momentum didn't continue, and actually the thriller part of it wasn't that great. I did enjoy the writing style because it felt like I was the therapist to all of these people. So you get different perspectives from 3 people. I'm not going to say who because it will spoil some of it. But the way it's written, it's like they're all sat on my therapist couch and I'm the one listening and like helping them, which I did enjoy. Although I would say that again towards, as we went through it, it did get a little bit more tedious as things became a bit repetitive. The other thing that I struggled with slightly is that all the characters were morally grey, so it was bad people doing things to bad people, which is not always my favourite thing in a book. And it really did make me consider some of the stuff that I put online. I know I have a YouTube channel and it basically documents my life, but I did question some of what I was doing and what I'm putting online and things like that, so that respect was also very good. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, this book, because I really enjoyed it at the beginning, but it did get repetitive and then it did fizzle out rather than have this big bang with the reveal for a thriller. So it's worth a read if it's something you're interested in, but just bear that in mind, I guess. So that was People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. I then stayed on my Kindle and moved on to my non-fiction pick, which was Shagged, Married, Annoyed by Chris and Rosie Ramsey. This book accompanies their podcast of the same name, and if you've seen my podcast video that I did a good year ago, it's one of my favourites and makes me laugh a lot, so I was keen to read the book to see how it compared. And I would say it does have the same chatty feel as the podcast, and you still get some of those stories from the public, which makes the podcast brilliant, but it doesn't work quite as well in book form. Now that might be just because of my version, and I'm really quite angry about it because I bought it from the Kindle store. Granted it was 99p, but I bought it from the Kindle store, so the formatting of it should have been good, where you could see the difference between the 2 people talking or writing, because right at the beginning of the book it says Rosie is in this font and Chris is in this font, and the font is exactly the same on the Kindle version that I've read. So that really frustrated me because it then meant it took me a little bit of time each time to work out which person was talking and which person was interjecting and all of that kind of stuff. So maybe it does have the same feel, just I didn't get it because of the format that I've read it in. So if you do want to read this book, get it in a physical copy because it will make it a lot easier. But as I say, it does follow the similar topics to what they would cover in the podcast, and some of the stories from the public did make me either cringe or laugh or whatever. So it is worth a read if you're a fan of their podcast. Go into it knowing that you're going to get some strong language, some really gross stuff and that kind of thing. But yeah, if you are going to read it in a physical format. So that was Shagged, Married, Annoyed by Chris and Rosie Ramsey. So we now need to grab the mini ears because it's now Magical Hopathon time. So this time around, Rachel Kerris hosted Magical Hopathon round 2, and this was to celebrate Disneyland Paris's 30th birthday, which I was actually there for, and those videos will start on Sunday. So if you're interested in those, click the subscribe button because there's 5 videos I think coming from that trip over the next few weeks. But yes, the readathon covers the 30th anniversary of Disneyland Paris and runs for 2 weeks this time, rather than the month-long one that she did for Walt Disney World back in October, and I'll link my book review for them up here for you. I was very eager to take part. I really enjoyed the one last time, and I quite like having a prompt to fit a book to. I've realised it helps me compile what I'm going to read that month. So my park prompt, I went for the one for Disneyland Park, which was read a book that's calling to you, and I may have stretched that prompt slightly and went for my reread, which was The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, because when I did the unhaul video, which again I'll link up here, I listed a few books that I wanted to reread before I decided whether I was getting rid of them or not, and this is the one that I wanted to get to first. So I took that as a book that was calling to me. So if you don't know, this is a thriller. This follows Rachel, who gets on the same train every day and sees a couple in their garden house and makes a story out for them, and then the woman in that couple disappears and she goes on to try and solve the case. One thing to say is that Rachel is not in a good place and she is an alcoholic. And I say that because one of the main things I took from this reread was how the police basically ignore anything that she says and say that she's an unreliable witness because of the fact that she's a drunk, which I found interesting and would be curious to know real cases and whether that was actually a thing that happened when people were investigating. Like people like her, I didn't like the characters very much. For a lot of it I found it a little bit of a slog because I disliked the people in it. Again, it's sort of, I mean, Rachel's not a bad person, but it's bad people doing bad things to each other, and as I said previously, it's not something I particularly enjoy, and this sort of cemented that a bit more. I would say though that the twist at the end of this really did save the book. It's very clever. I'm sure many people probably guess it, and I went into this obviously knowing the twist, which did detract slightly from my enjoyment because I knew it was coming, but I couldn't remember how we got there, so that was the bit that I enjoyed. But if it wasn't for the ending, this would have got a much lower rating from me, and the end really did save it. So unfortunately though, I'm still a bit in two minds whether to get rid of this one or not, because I didn't enjoy it, but I did enjoy it, and I know about the twist, so do I keep it? So I'm still on the fence about this, but it'll be a little while until I come to actually do an unhaul from this bookshelf again. So that was The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins, and my entry prompt to Disneyland Park, which was read a book that's calling to you. I then went to Big Thunder Mountain, which was read the first book in a series, and I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer, which is a fantasy romance kind of book, but it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast basically. This is slightly out of my comfort zone. I don't read fantasy very often, but with it being a story I know very well because it's my favourite Disney film, which is part of the reason why I went for this one for this prompt, I thought it would be fairly accessible for me, and it was. This was such an easy book to read. I didn't feel lost at any point. I didn't feel like it was alienating me from the genre at all, and although it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling and you can definitely see aspects of Beauty and the Beast in it, it is its own book and its own story, which I liked as well, but if you didn't know that it was a retelling you probably wouldn't have got too many indications of it. So the synopsis of this is that Harper, who lives in Washington DC, gets somehow transported into this fantasy world where Prince Wren has to break the curse and get someone to fall in love with him, but once a season he turns into a murderous monster. And one of the things that I particularly liked about this book was the fact that Harper has cerebral palsy, yet she is never portrayed as weak or not able to do anything. I thought, and the cerebral palsy wasn't a major point in this, but I thought it was good to have that kind of representation. Obviously I'm not own voices, so I don't know how well it was portrayed in this book, but I liked the fact that she wasn't a completely, you know, able-bodied standard kind of heroine, yet she was portrayed as this strong, resilient, just brilliant main character. And I also like that the romance wasn't the main focus of this book. Obviously it's there, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, he's got to break a curse about someone falling in love with him, but the romance isn't the main focus, and I appreciated that as well, and would be really eager to read the rest of the series now, so we'll be keeping an eye out for those. Apparently the next one is A Heart So Fierce and Broken, particularly as the ending of this had a nice little turn of events that I'm intrigued to see where it goes with it. So that's I can't say it though, that's the problem. So that's A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. I then decided to give an audiobook a go So I went to Hyperspace Mountain, which was read a book that takes you out of this world, and I thought by doing it in audio while I walk the dog, that is getting me out of my world at that point. Again, they have stretched the prompt slightly, but I listened to extremely loud and incredibly close. Extremely close and incredibly loud, I should know the way around, but that book by Jonathan Safran Foer. I'm not good with audiobooks. I've now listened to, I think this was my third or fourth, and I really struggle with them. And this was the same. I found that the way it was written, I guess it's the same in the book, I don't know, with the two parts. So if you don't know, we're following Oscar, whose dad dies in the 9/11 attack, and he's obviously coming to terms with all of that, and he finds something in his dad's wardrobe that then sets him on a quest to try and find out what it's all about. And then alongside that we have a section from his grandparents who were in Dresden during World War II, and they're writing letters back to Oscar. Yeah, the two, as you can tell, I got very confused. The two things didn't seem to fit together. It was very disjointed. I didn't follow it, and I didn't enjoy it very much. Now, again, same with the Shagged, Married and Lloyd. I don't know whether it's just because of the format that I consumed it in. If I read it physically, would I have got more out of the story? Probably my least favourite book of the month, and definitely got the lowest rating, but I would say it did make me laugh at points. Oscar is quite a amusing character at times, but I found most of it very unrealistic. I mean, who would let a 9-year-old wander around New York by themselves after a terrorist attack? I wasn't a fan, and I can't remember which way around it goes. So there's that book by Jonathan Safran Foer, and I listened to that on audiobook for my Hyperspace Mountain prompt. I then went to see the main man himself, Mickey Mouse, and that is to read a book that everybody loves, and I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. The prompt would let you know that this is a very prominent book around the Bookstanet world. If you don't know, it follows a reclusive Hollywood actress, Evelyn Hugo, as she's about 70-odd in this, and she asks a relatively unknown writer, reporter, journalist, that's the word I'm looking for, to come and write her memoir, and she obviously covers all of her 7 husbands. I was a bit scared about picking this one up because of how much it's hyped. I'm not sure I completely get why it's hyped. I did enjoy this a lot. There were lots of aspects that I really did enjoy, but I don't really understand how people are giving it. Well, I do understand why people are giving it 5 stars. It just wasn't that for me. I very much enjoyed Evelyn Hugo as a character. She is very manipulative. She knows what she wants and how to get it. She has several flaws, and she's not shy of showing them. The way that Taylor Jenkins Reid writes this book is very entertaining. It's very easy to get through. I would say the text though is very small, which made it quite difficult in that respect. I much prefer a slightly bigger font. Thank you, people. The main takeaway of this is how complex humans are, basically. What they go to do for the things that they want. I'm sure there are people on YouTube and elsewhere that have been much more eloquent about this book, so I'm not going to go into it much more than that. And other than to say, definitely worth a read. The hype is real, the hype is good, but I personally gave it 4 stars rather than 5, but would recommend it still. So that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, as I'm filming, we have 2 more days, because I'm filming this in the morning, so we have the Saturday and Sunday left of the Magical Hopathon round 2, and I am just over halfway through the last act of Adam Campbell by Andy Jones, which is my prompt for Crush's Coaster to read a TBR vet, so a book that's been on your shelf for the longest, which is definitely this one for me. Obviously I haven't finished it yet, so this will now be in May's wrap up, but I wanted to mention it here just so that you knew all the books that I was reading for the Magical Hopathon. This one follows Adam and a group of terminally ill patients who come together to put on a Shakespeare show, and I'm enjoying it so far, but as I say, I will give you more views on this in my May wrap up. So if you're interested in knowing what I think about it, please click that subscribe button, because that will come out in a month's time, obviously. So there you go, they're all the books I have read to this point in April. Obviously we've still got about a week, or when you're watching this we've got like 3 days. So anything from the last act of Adam Campbell onwards will be in my May wrap up. But if you've enjoyed this one, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!